Hey, today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. The drizzle fell lightly on the bustling streets of New York, casting a misty veil over the shimmering skyscrapers. Vera Grace stepped off the old bus, her worn green umbrella trembling with each gust of cold wind. At 26, she didn't stand out in the crowd, her brown hair tied neatly, her gentle blue eyes and a thin coat frayed at the shoulders. But her smile, though soft, held a strange allure, as if it carried both resilience and compassion. Vera paused before the iron gate of the Cole mansion, a grand building with pristine, white walls and a meticulously tended garden. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off her nerves. This was a big opportunity, a nanny job for Jonathan Cole's son, the CEO of Cole Enterprises, the city's most powerful real estate conglomerate. If hired, she'd save enough to chase her dream. Opening a charity daycare for orphaned children, kids like her, who grew up without anyone to call family. Vera was raised in an orphanage on the outskirts of New York. Her childhood was filled with long, lonely days and nights of silent tears, with no one to pick her up after school. Yet those hardships forged her into someone strong, always seeking to bring joy to others. She loved children, not just for their innocence, but because she knew what it felt like to need someone to listen, someone to hold your hand when the world felt too vast. The gate opened, and a middle-aged butler led her into the main hall. The interior of the Cole mansion left Vera awestruck. Soaring ceilings, sparkling crystal chandeliers, and abstract paintings on the walls. But she quickly refocused, centering herself on why she was here: the interview. Jonathan Cole sat behind an ebony desk in his study, his sharp eyes scanning Vera Grace's resume. At 32, he was the picture of success, a brilliant CEO, wealthy and handsome, with dark hair and deep gray eyes. But behind his perfect exterior was a heart long frozen, a broken marriage 5 years ago, when his ex-wife left him and their son Noah without explanation, had left a scar that wouldn't heal. He no longer believed in love, nor in promises of forever. Noah, Jonathan's 4-year-old son, was the only light in his life. But that light was fading. Noah was bright and sensitive, but carried a fear of abandonment. He spoke little, startled in his sleep, and didn't easily warm to strangers. Jonathan loved his son deeply, but his demanding job and painful memories left him unsure how to connect with Noah. He tried hiring nannies, but none lasted. Some quit because Noah wouldn't cooperate. Others were fired because Jonathan doubted their motives. Vera's resume made Jonathan frown. No prestigious degree, no powerful connections, just an orphaned girl working as a freelance nanny. She seemed too pure, too perfect on paper, and it made him suspicious. No ambition? Or is she good at hiding it? He wondered, tapping his finger lightly on the desk. He didn't want a stranger in his private life, especially not when he'd built walls to protect Noah and himself from further pain. The butler knocked, announcing Vera's arrival. Jonathan stood, adjusted his suit jacket, and walked out with an icy expression. Let's get this over with, he thought. Vera sat across from Jonathan in the vast living room, her hands clasped tightly to hide her nervousness. He was taller than she'd imagined, with an imposing presence that made her feel small. His voice was low and sharp as he began the interview. Miss Grace, how long have you been a nanny? Jonathan asked, his gaze probing, as if trying to see through her. 4 years, sir, Vera replied, her voice soft but clear. I've cared for many children, from infants to elementary age. I love this work. He gave a faint hum, flipping through her file. No early childhood education degree, no notable connections. What makes you think you're suited for my son? Vera didn't flinch. She met Jonathan's eyes, though his cold stare made her shiver. I don't have a fancy degree, but I know what children need. Not just basic care, but genuine attention. I believe I can help Noah feel safe. Her words made Jonathan pause. There was something in her tone, sincere, unguarded, that unsettled him. He didn't want someone who could so easily stir his or Noah's emotions. You speak well, he said, his voice tinged with sarcasm. But I need proof, not promises. Vera nodded, not arguing. She knew people like Jonathan didn't trust easily, and she didn't blame him. She only hoped for a chance to prove herself. The interview was interrupted by the sound of tiny footsteps. Noah appeared at the door, his dark hair mussed, his big round eyes scanning the room. He wore pajamas and clutched an old teddy bear. Jonathan's voice softened instantly as he stood and approached. "Noah, what are you doing here? Go back to your room. Let Daddy talk." But Noah didn't listen. He quietly moved closer to Vera, his eyes lighting up in a rare way. To Jonathan's astonishment, Noah took her hand, his tiny fingers gripping tightly as if afraid she'd vanish. Can you tell a story?" he whispered, his voice so soft it was nearly inaudible. Vera smiled and knelt to his level. "Of course, sweetheart. What kind do you like? Pirates or superheroes?" Noah hesitated, then said, "A story about a mom." The words froze the room. Jonathan stiffened, his eyes darkening. Vera sensed the tension but answered gently, "All right, I'll tell a beautiful story about a mother who loves her child more than anything in the world." Noah nodded, then did something no one expected. He leaned his head on Vera's shoulder and whispered, "She's like Mommy." The quiet words pierced Jonathan's heart. He'd never seen Noah bond with anyone like this, not even with him. Vera gently stroked Noah's hair, her eyes warm but tinged with sadness. She understood the longing for a mother. She'd felt it herself. She made no promises to Noah, but resolve welled up inside her. She wanted to help this boy even just a little. Jonathan stood there wrestling with his emotions. Part of him wanted to send Vera away immediately. She was too dangerous, not because she had ulterior motives, but because she could make Noah and even him depend on her presence. But seeing Noah hold her hand, his eyes bright as if he'd found something precious, Jonathan couldn't deny the truth. She was the first person to reach his son. "Fine," Jonathan said, his voice cold but less sharp. "You're hired. 1-month trial. But remember, Miss Grace, don't overstep your role. This is a job, not a family." Vera nodded, though her eyes held a flicker of sadness. She understood Jonathan was protecting Noah, but his detachment made her feel like an outsider. "I understand, Mr. Cole," she replied. In the days that followed, Vera began her work at the Cole mansion. She quickly earned Noah's trust. She told stories, played with puzzles, and listened to his halting words. She saw that Noah didn't just need care. He needed healing. His fear of abandonment had taken root deep in his soul. Once when Noah asked, "Will you stay forever?" Vera only smiled, not daring to promise, knowing life was never that simple. Jonathan, though he tried to keep his distance, couldn't help noticing Vera. He saw her stay up late preparing toys for Noah, saw her patience when the boy threw tantrums. Once he caught her sitting in the garden, staring into the distance with a wistful expression. He wondered what she was thinking, but quickly dismissed it. "She's just the nanny," he told himself. Vera sat by Noah's bed telling a story about a rabbit finding its home. Her voice was gentle, like a lullaby, lulling Noah into sleep with a rare smile on his lips. But as the story ended, her eyes grew sad. She remembered her own childhood, nights spent dreaming of a family that would come for her, a dream that never came true. She didn't know that. From the doorway, Jonathan was watching. His gaze lingered on her face, on the tenderness she showed Noah. His heart stirred, a feeling he thought long dead. But he turned away, striding back to his room, muttering to himself, "Don't be foolish, Jonathan. She doesn't belong here." The rain had stopped, but the New York sky remained overcast, as if mirroring Jonathan Cole's mood as he left the lawyer's office. That night, he'd received news that his grandfather, Edward Cole, the founder of Cole Enterprises, had passed away in the hospital after a stroke. Edward wasn't just the man who guided Jonathan into the world of business. He was his only emotional anchor through life's upheavals. His grandfather's death was a profound loss for Jonathan. After the funeral, the reading of the will left him feeling like everything he'd built was crumbling. In a dimly lit wooden room, the elderly lawyer, Mr. Harris, read an unexpected condition in the will with a steady, low voice. Jonathan Cole must marry and establish a stable family within 3 months from the date of this will's announcement. Failure to do so will result in the transfer of control of Cole Enterprises to Victor Cole, Edward Cole's brother. The name Victor made Jonathan clench his fists. Uncle Victor, his grandfather's brother, was a greedy man with a scandal-ridden past. Over a decade ago, Victor's financial manipulations nearly bankrupted the company. If not for Edward's timely intervention, Cole Enterprises would have ceased to exist. The thought of the conglomerate, his family's legacy, supporting thousands of employees, falling into Victor's hands made Jonathan feel suffocated. He couldn't let that happen, not just for his grandfather's honor, but for Noah, his 4-year-old son, who deserved a secure future. But the will's condition stabbed like a knife into Jonathan's already frozen heart. Marriage? After what he'd endured with his ex-wife, a woman driven by ambition who abandoned him and Noah without a word. He'd sworn never to remarry. To him, love was a deception wrapped in empty promises. He didn't believe in it and refused to drag Noah into a staged family just to satisfy a will. Back at the Cole mansion, Jonathan locked himself in his study, a bottle of whiskey glinting under the lamplight. He stared out the window, where darkness enveloped the garden. Options flashed through his mind, only to be dismissed. Hire an actress? Too risky. They might leak the secret or demand more. Find a business partner for a sham marriage? No, the women in his circle came with ambition and ulterior motives. He needed someone trustworthy, someone with no reason to betray him or hurt Noah. Noah's clear, bright laughter from the garden snapped Jonathan out of his thoughts. He stepped onto the balcony and looked down to where his son was playing with Vera Grace, the nanny hired less than a month ago. Under the soft glow of the lights, Vera knelt beside Noah, helping him build a wooden castle. Her smile was gentle, her eyes brightening as Noah excitedly described warriors guarding the castle. Noah laughed, a rare laugh Jonathan had nearly forgotten. The sight made his heart skip. Noah had never opened up to any nanny like this before. With Vera, the boy seemed to have found a safe haven, someone who listened to his trivial stories without judgment. Jonathan realized something. Vera wasn't just Noah's nanny. She was the only person in his life right now without hidden motives. She didn't care about money or power, evident in how she declined small gifts offered by the butler. She genuinely cared for Noah, and more importantly, she had no reason to betray him. The thought struck like a spark. Vera Grace. She could be the answer. Vera was wiping dirt from Noah's hands when the butler arrived, informing her that Mr. Cole wanted to see her in the study. Surprised, Jonathan rarely summoned her directly, usually communicating through the butler or brief notes. She smoothed Noah's hair and gave him a reassuring smile. "I'll be back soon, sweetheart. Play with your teddy bear, okay?" Entering the study, Vera sensed a heavy atmosphere. Jonathan sat behind the ebony desk, his gaze sharp but tinged with something unusual, not his usual detachment, but an indescribable tension. He gestured for her to sit, but Vera chose to stand, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Miss Grace," Jonathan began, his voice low and even, "I have a proposal for you. It's unrelated to your nanny duties, but I need you to hear me out." Vera nodded, though her heart began to race. She didn't know what to expect, but his tone made her uneasy. He stood and moved to the window, turning his back as if to hide his emotions. "My grandfather just passed away. His will requires me to marry and build a stable family within 3 months. If I don't, Cole Enterprises will go to my Uncle Victor, a man who would destroy everything my family has built." Vera listened silently, trying to grasp the weight of his words. She knew Cole Enterprises wasn't just a company. It funded social programs, including ones for orphans she'd always supported. But why was he telling her this? Jonathan turned, his eyes locking onto hers. "I need someone to fulfill this condition. A marriage on paper, lasting 1 year. After that, we divorce, and things go back to normal. In return, I'll fund the charity daycare you've always wanted to open. This is a deal, nothing more." The proposal hit Vera like a shockwave. She opened her mouth but couldn't speak. Marry Jonathan Cole? The idea was so far-fetched, so absurd, she almost laughed, thinking he was joking. But his eyes, serious, unwavering, told her this was no jest. Are you serious?" Vera asked, her voice trembling. "Why me? You could choose anyone, someone more suitable, more familiar." Jonathan stepped closer, his voice dropping, carrying a tone she couldn't decipher. Because I don't trust anyone else. You're the only one with no reason to exploit me or Noah. You care for my son, and I see it every day. I need someone where the risks are manageable. His words cut like an unintended knife. Manageable risks. She was just a safe option, a tool for his purpose. Vera's heart tightened, but she kept her voice steady. I don't want to be part of a fake marriage, Mr. Cole. I just want to do my job well and help Noah. Jonathan didn't waver. He stepped closer, his gaze piercing. If Victor takes over, everything collapses. Not just the company, but the charities you care about. Schools, programs for orphans. Thousands will lose their jobs and Noah's future will be unstable. Do you want that? His question stopped her cold. She thought of Noah, who'd started smiling more, trusting her. She thought of her dream, a school where orphaned kids could find joy, as she'd once longed for. And she thought of the thousands relying on Cole Enterprises. The responsibility weighed on her, though she was just an ordinary woman with no power or status. I need time to think, Vera said, her voice quiet but firm. This isn't something I can decide right away. Jonathan nodded, his gaze softening slightly. You have one night, but don't forget, time isn't on our side. Vera returned to her small room in the mansion, closed the door and sat on the bed, her mind in turmoil. She pulled out an old notebook where she'd scribbled childhood dreams. One scrawled line stopped her. Want a family even for one day. But the family she'd imagined wasn't a contract, not the cold transaction Jonathan proposed. She thought of Noah, his eyes lighting up when she told stories. She thought of other orphaned kids who might lose opportunities if Cole Enterprises fell. And she thought of Jonathan, the cold man who sometimes let slip vulnerability in his gaze when he looked at Noah. She didn't want to admit it, but deep down she felt a faint connection to him. Not love, but empathy for the scars they both carried. That night Vera didn't sleep. She stood by the window watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Finally she sighed, telling herself, just 1 year. For Noah, for my dream. But her heart warned that entering this game might cost her more than she imagined. The next morning Vera entered Jonathan's study. He was reviewing documents, his expression as cold as ever. She stood tall, took a deep breath and said, I agree, but I have conditions. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, signaling her to continue. I don't want money, Vera said firmly, but you have to keep your word about the daycare, and you must promise Noah won't be hurt by this. He's been through enough. Her words made Jonathan pause. He looked at her, feeling a flicker of respect for the first time. Agreed, he said. I promise. The wedding took place days later, so quiet it was almost secretive. At City Hall, Vera wore a simple white dress prepared by the butler. No flowers, no celebration. She stood before the officiant, her heart pounding as the vows were read. Jonathan, in a black suit, maintained his icy demeanor, as if this were just another business meeting. But when Noah appeared, holding both their hands with a radiant smile, everything shifted. The boy didn't grasp the ceremony's meaning, only tugging Vera's hand happily and saying, You're the prettiest bride. Vera smiled, but her smile carried a pang of sorrow. She wanted to tell Noah this wasn't real, but she couldn't bear to shatter his joy. The ceremony ended quickly. The plain wedding band on Vera's finger, unadorned by stones, felt heavier than she expected. As they left City Hall, Noah ran ahead, while Vera and Jonathan walked behind, keeping their distance like strangers. That evening, Vera moved into a private room in the Cole mansion, spacious but cold. She stood by the window, looking down at the garden where Noah had played with her. Her hand touched the ring, her mind repeating, just a contract. Don't let your heart stray. But when she looked up, her eyes caught Jonathan standing in the opposite hallway. He was watching her, his gaze unreadable. Not cold, not warm, but complex in a way she couldn't fathom. Vera turned away, closing the window, trying to lock away the emotions stirring within her. But she knew, from this moment, everything had changed forever. The Cole mansion, with its pristine white walls and lush green garden, was now the place Vera Grace called home, if only in name. After the quiet wedding at City Hall, she moved into a private room in the East Wing, far from Jonathan Cole's quarters. The room was spacious, furnished with a large bed, an ebony desk, and a window overlooking the lake. But it felt cold, a constant reminder that she was merely a temporary guest in Jonathan and Noah's world. On her first day living there, Jonathan summoned her to his study. He stood behind his desk, his gray eyes as cold as stone. "Miss Grace," he said, his voice even but sharp, "let's be clear. We only play our parts in public, for shareholders, family, the press. Here you're still Noah's nanny, and I'm your employer. Nothing more, nothing less." Vera nodded, her heart tightening slightly. His words weren't surprising. She'd known this was a transaction from the start. But his detachment left her with an indescribable emptiness. "I understand, Mr. Cole," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "I'll do my duty." Jonathan held her gaze a second longer than usual, as if searching for something in her blue eyes. Then he turned away, signaling her to leave. As the door closed behind her, Vera exhaled, telling herself to keep her heart in check. This wasn't a family nor love, just a contract lasting 1 year. Their daily lives unfolded like parallel lines, never crossing. Jonathan left early each morning, immersed in meetings and business strategies at Cole Enterprises. Vera spent her days with Noah, caring for the boy with all the love she had. She taught him to draw, read books, and told stories of grand dreams. Stories she'd once told herself during lonely nights at the orphanage. Noah became the unwitting bridge between two strangers. The 4-year-old, with his messy black hair and big round eyes, gradually opened up to Vera. She didn't push him to talk or force him to overcome his fear of abandonment. Instead, she listened patiently, letting him come to her on his own. One afternoon, as they sat under an oak tree in the garden, Noah suddenly handed her a drawing. It showed 3 figures holding hands, a tall man, a small boy, and a girl with long hair. "This is Daddy, Noah and Miss Vera," he said, his voice full of pride. Vera's throat tightened. She stroked Noah's hair, smiling to hide the tears welling up. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," she said. "I'll keep it forever." But inside, a voice warned her, "Don't let Noah get too close. When the contract ends, he'll lose another important person." The thought pierced her heart. Jonathan, though he tried to keep his distance, couldn't ignore Noah's changes. The boy smiled more, no longer startled awake from sleep. The nightmares that once made Noah cry out had faded, replaced by excited chatter about "Miss Vera said this," or "Miss Vera did that." One evening, returning home late, Jonathan stood outside Noah's room, hearing Vera sing a lullaby, a gentle song he'd never heard. Noah slept soundly, his face peaceful, while Vera held his hand as if afraid he'd vanish. That moment stirred something unfamiliar in Jonathan. Not love, he told himself, just gratitude. Vera was doing better than any nanny before her, but he couldn't admit that. Deep down, he was growing curious about her gentle smile, her wistful eyes, the way she gave her whole heart to his son without asking for anything in return. One night, Noah spiked a high fever. Vera noticed when he whimpered in his sleep, his forehead burning. She immediately called the family doctor, but tended to him herself while waiting. She wiped him down with cool cloths, softly singing to ease his discomfort. "I'm right here, sweetheart," she whispered, holding his hand tightly. "Everything will be okay." The doctor arrived, examined Noah, and prescribed medicine, assuring her it was just a common fever. But Vera stayed by his bedside. She sat through the night, changing cool cloths, checking his temperature, and murmuring reassurances. As dawn broke, exhausted, she slumped by Noah's bed, still holding his hand, and fell asleep. Jonathan returned from a late meeting, his steps slowing as he saw the scene in Noah's room. Vera was asleep, her brown hair disheveled, her face tired but still radiating gentleness. Noah lay beside her, breathing evenly, his small hand clutching her finger. The early morning light streamed through the window, casting a soft golden glow over them, like a painting Jonathan couldn't look away from. His heart stirred, a beat he thought long dead. He stood there wrestling with himself. "It's just gratitude," he told himself. "She's doing her job well, that's all." But as he gently draped a blanket over Vera, his fingers brushed her shoulder, sending a jolt through him. He pulled back quickly, turned away, and tried to shake off the feeling. To avoid suspicion from shareholders and family, Jonathan and Vera had to appear together at a charity gala hosted by Cole Enterprises. Vera was nervous when she received a gift box from Jonathan, a shimmering emerald evening gown sparkling like the sea. She'd never worn anything so luxurious, and as she stood before the mirror, she felt like a stranger. The dress hugged her curves, but she only felt awkward, afraid of embarrassing Jonathan in front of the crowd. Entering the ballroom, Vera felt dozens of eyes on her. Jonathan, dashing in a black tuxedo, offered his arm. "Just act natural," he whispered, his voice low but reassuring. "They only need to see us as a couple." Vera nodded, forcing a smile. But as they moved through the crowd, questions from shareholders and partners overwhelmed her. "A secret wedding, was it? How did you two meet?" a middle-aged woman asked, her eyes brimming with curiosity. Vera opened her mouth but didn't know how to respond. Jonathan subtly squeezed her hand under the table, his touch warm and steady. "Let me handle it," he murmured, then turned to the woman with a perfect smile. "We met because of Noah. She's special, not just to me, but to my son." His words stunned Vera. She knew it was an act, but the sincerity in his voice made her heart race. His touch, though unintentional, left her flustered. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away, afraid he'd see emotions she hadn't yet admitted to herself. That night, back at the mansion, Vera stood before the mirror, slipping off the gown. She looked at the plain wedding band on her finger, wondering if she was letting her heart stray. "This isn't real," she reminded herself. But Jonathan's smile, his hand holding hers, haunted her through the night. One afternoon, Vera was playing with Noah in the living room, stacking wooden blocks into a castle. In her excitement to grab more toys, she accidentally knocked over her old cloth bag, and a worn leather notebook slid out, rolling under the couch. Absorbed in helping Noah build the tallest tower in the world, she didn't notice. When she cleaned up later and checked her bag, she realized the notebook was gone. She knelt down, searching the floor, under the couch, behind the curtains, but found nothing. Her heart sank. The notebook held childhood scribbles, dreams she'd written in the orphanage. It was worthless to anyone else, but to her it was an entire world. "Noah, have you seen my little notebook? The one with the brown leather cover?" she asked, keeping her voice calm. Noah shook his head, busy with his castle. Vera searched a bit longer, but to no avail. She sighed, telling herself it must have fallen somewhere and would turn up later. Still, the loss left her somber all day. That evening, after putting Noah to bed, Jonathan entered the living room to grab some documents. As he bent to pick up a pen that had rolled under the couch, he spotted something odd. A worn leather notebook, tucked behind a couch leg. He picked it up, running his hand over its rough surface. No name, no clear markings, but he guessed it was Vera's. She was the only one who carried such simple things. He took the notebook to his study and set it on his desk. Part of him wanted to open it, curious about what she'd written, but he hesitated. It was personal, and though he was her husband in name, he had no right to pry. In the end, he slipped it into a drawer, telling himself he'd return it at the right moment. Yet the thought of it lingered, like an unanswered question. One evening, Noah insisted the three of them bake together in the kitchen. Vera hesitated. She didn't want to cross boundaries with Jonathan, but Noah's eager eyes were impossible to refuse. She gathered flour, eggs, and chocolate, while Noah ran around, laughing brightly. Jonathan, just back from the office, was dragged into the kitchen by Noah. "Daddy, help me make a cake," the boy pleaded. Jonathan raised an eyebrow, clearly out of his element, but he shed his jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and reluctantly joined in. Vera guided him to mix the batter, but he clumsily spilled flour across the counter, making Noah burst into laughter. Vera laughed too, flour dusting her cheek, her eyes sparkling under the kitchen lights. "Mr. Cole, like this," she said, taking his hand to show him how to stir. Their touch made them both freeze. Time seemed to slow, and for a moment the kitchen felt strangely warm. Noah, oblivious to the tension, clapped and cheered, "Our cake will be the best." Vera turned away, pretending to wipe flour from her hands, while Jonathan cleared his throat, focusing on the mixing bowl as if it were a $1 million contract. When the cake was baked, the three sat around the kitchen table, sharing slices of slightly lopsided chocolate cake. Noah devoured his, while Vera and Jonathan exchanged a glance. wordless but heavy with meaning. For the first time, Jonathan smiled freely, a smile that lit up his usually cold face. But when their eyes lingered too long, both looked away. Vera told herself this was just an act, just for Noah. Jonathan told himself he couldn't feel anything beyond gratitude. A sweet, fragile feeling settled over the kitchen, like an unspoken promise. The pale golden sunlight filtered through the large glass windows, glinting off the polished wooden floors of the Cole mansion. Vera stood in the garden with Noah, gathering dried leaves for a craft project. The boy's laughter rang out, clear as wind chimes, melting her heart. But deep inside, Vera felt an unnameable void. 2 months since signing the marriage contract with Jonathan Cole, she tried to stick to the rules. A transaction, no emotions. Yet the small moments with Noah, and the times Jonathan's gaze lingered on her, made her heart waver. Jonathan stood on the second-floor balcony, watching the garden below. He'd just finished a work call, but his mind drifted to Vera. She was kneeling beside Noah, showing him how to arrange leaves into the shape of a bird. Her smile, simple, sincere, stirred something strange in him, as if his heart was awakening from a long slumber. He frowned, telling himself it was merely gratitude for a dedicated nanny. But when Noah ran to hug her, calling Miss Vera, with such affection, Jonathan couldn't deny that the scene made him want to join them, to be part of it. One Saturday morning, Vera took Noah to the children's hospital for a routine checkup. The boy clung to her hand, his eyes anxious as they entered the stark white hallway. "Miss Vera, I don't like doctors," Noah whispered, his voice trembling. Vera knelt down, offering a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'm right here. It's just a quick check, like a superhero testing their powers." Noah giggled, his fear slowly fading. In the waiting room, a warm voice called out from behind. "Vera Grace? Can't believe I'm seeing you here." Vera turned, surprised to find Will Harper, an old friend from college. Now a pediatrician, Will was tall, with a friendly smile, his eyes lighting up as he looked at her. "Will, it's been ages," Vera exclaimed, giving him a light hug. They chatted briefly, reminiscing about their days volunteering at an orphanage. Will had helped her through tough times in college, quietly supporting her dream of opening a charity daycare. His sincerity put her at ease, like stepping back into a simpler time. Will glanced at Noah, who was drawing in the waiting area. "Cute kid. Is he yours?" he asked, curious. Vera shook her head, forcing a smile. "No, I'm just his nanny." She didn't mention the fake marriage, unwilling to explain the complications. Will nodded, then suggested, "Are you free tonight? Let's grab dinner, catch up. I'm new in town and want to reconnect with old friends." Vera hesitated. She knew her life was bound by a strict contract, but what harm was there in dinner with a friend? "Sure," she agreed, smiling softly. That evening at a cozy little restaurant, Vera sat across from Will. Wearing a simple blue dress, her hair loose, she spoke passionately about her dream of a charity daycare. Will listened, his eyes full of admiration. "You're still the same, Vera. Always putting your heart into everything," he said, raising his wine glass. Vera smiled, but her thoughts drifted to Jonathan. His gaze when he stood outside Noah's room, sometimes tender, sometimes cold as ice. At that moment, Jonathan entered the restaurant with a business partner. He'd finished a meeting early and agreed to stop by to discuss further. But as his eyes scanned the room, he froze. Vera was laughing, talking with an unfamiliar man. Her smile, the one he'd unconsciously come to notice, was now for someone else. A wave of jealousy surged, tightening his chest. He clenched his fists, trying to maintain his cool exterior, but his eyes burned with an undeniable fire. As Vera stood to leave, her eyes met Jonathan's across the room. Her heart skipped a beat. He stood there, his gaze icy, as if seeing through her. Will walked her to the door, lightly touching her shoulder to say goodbye. Jonathan turned away without a word, but his tension was palpable. That night, back at the mansion, with Noah asleep, Jonathan waited for Vera in his study. The dim lamplight highlighted the strain on his face. "Do you think you can go out with someone else while you're still my wife in name?" His voice was low, laced with pressure. Vera was stunned, not expecting him to bring it up. "You said this was just a contract," she replied, her voice trembling. "Don't I have a right to my own life?" Jonathan stepped closer, his eyes flaring with something unnameable. Not quite anger, but closer to helplessness. You know the terms of our deal. Don't complicate things. Vera met his gaze, tears threatening but held back. Complicate things? You think I want that? I'm just trying to do my part. As a nanny, as a fake wife. But have you ever considered that I have a heart too? She turned away, leaving Jonathan standing there, his heart in turmoil. He wanted to call her back, but logic stopped him. The emotion he'd tried to bury was resurfacing, and he was terrified to realize it had a name. Jealousy. The days that followed grew heavy with tension. Jonathan avoided Vera, speaking only when necessary, while she forced smiles for Noah to keep him from noticing the shift. But every time she saw Jonathan, how he gently lifted Noah onto his shoulders, or the way his eyes lingered on her when she sang to Noah, her heart ached. She realized she loved him, no matter how much she tried to deny it. One evening, with Noah fast asleep, Vera sat in her room, opening her old notebook. She wrote, I once dreamed of a real family, where Noah called me mom, and Jonathan looked at me not because of a contract, but that dream is so foolish. He'll never open his heart, and I can't stay to hurt myself. Tears fell, blurring the ink. She closed the notebook, hid it in a drawer, and resolved to leave when the contract ended. Though the thought of leaving Noah made her choke. She recalled Jonathan holding her hand at the charity gala, his light touch sending her heart racing. Or the time he stood outside Noah's room, watching her tell stories with an expression she couldn't decipher. Those moments gave her hope, but his coldness afterwards snuffed it out. He doesn't need me, she told herself. He only needs a wife on paper. Vera began preparing for her departure. She researched a small apartment near her old neighborhood where she could start over. But each time Noah hugged her, calling her Miss Vera with such love, she wanted to stay. She realized she didn't just love Jonathan. She loved this little family, the one she'd never had. One day while taking Noah to the park, another mother struck up a conversation, casually asking, Such a sweet kid. Are you his mom? Vera smiled sadly, shaking her head. No, I'm just his caretaker. The words cut like a knife. She realized that no matter how much she loved Noah, she was still an outsider, to the world, and perhaps to Jonathan. That night she sat by her window, gazing at the faint moonlight. She whispered to herself, Just a few more months, Vera. Then you'll be free. But why does freedom hurt so much? She didn't know that. In the next room, Jonathan couldn't sleep either, his eyes fixed on the wedding band he still wore. Not for the contract, but for a reason he hadn't dared admit. While Vera and Jonathan grappled with their emotions, another storm was brewing. Victor, Jonathan's uncle, knew the 3-month deadline for the will was nearing, and Jonathan was close to meeting its terms. Unwilling to lose control of Cole Enterprises, Victor made his move. One morning, tabloids exploded with sensational headlines. Gold-digging nanny, Vera Grace's plot to marry a billionaire. The articles accused Vera of using Noah to get to Jonathan, branding her an opportunist with a shady past. Though baseless, the slander spread rapidly online. Paparazzi photos of Vera, at the park, the hospital, even dining with Will, were paired with vicious comments. Vera discovered the news when an old colleague sent her a link. Reading each line, her heart felt crushed. Anonymous messages flooded in. Fake. You don't deserve the Coles. She tried to stay calm for Noah, but when he asked, Miss Vera, why are you sad? She only hugged him, unable to answer. At a charity event they both had to attend, Vera felt the weight of judgmental stares and whispered gossip. A wealthy woman, Victor's friend, loudly asked in front of the crowd, Miss Grace, I hear you're quite skilled at charming the rich. Any secrets to share? Laughter erupted, and Vera lowered her head, clutching her dress. Jonathan, beside her, started to speak, but Vera stopped him with a subtle shake of her head. She didn't want him defending her, not for the contract. That night back at the mansion, Vera couldn't take it anymore. She stood outside Jonathan's room and knocked. When he opened the door, she said, her voice breaking, I don't want to be a burden. Noah deserves a peaceful life, not one dragged through gossip because of me. I think I should leave. Jonathan froze. Leave, he repeated, his voice louder than usual. You think running away will fix this? Vera looked at him, tears streaming down. I don't belong here, Jonathan. I never did. She turned away, leaving him standing there, his heart gripped by a fear he hadn't felt in years. The fear of losing her. Days later, at a critical shareholders meeting for Cole Enterprises, Victor played his final card. Before dozens of shareholders and the press, he stood, his tone dripping with sarcasm. We're discussing the company's future, but let's address something first. Jonathan's marriage to that nanny, an obvious opportunist, is it trustworthy? Is he fit to lead when he lets someone like her into the Cole family? The room buzzed. Jonathan, at the head of the table, clenched his fists. He glared at Victor, his eyes sharp as knives. But as Victor continued, she's nothing but a gold digger. Jonathan shot to his feet, his voice ringing out, cold but powerful. Enough. The room fell silent. Jonathan stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over everyone. I love my wife, he said, each word deliberate. Vera Grace is the only person I trust to be a mother to my son. She doesn't need wealth or status, but she's given Noah and me something no one in this room could buy. A family. Anyone who insults her insults my family. His declaration stunned the room. Shareholders exchanged glances. Reporters scribbled frantically. Victor paled, unprepared for Jonathan's public stance. But the most shocked was Jonathan himself. As he spoke, he realized his words weren't an act. They were true. He loved Vera, not because of the contract, but because she'd brought his heart back to life. Vera, invited to the meeting for a charity initiative, stood in the corner, hearing every word. Her heart pounded, tears falling silently. She wanted to believe him, but fear of being hurt held her back. When the meeting ended, she slipped away without a word to Jonathan. Gray clouds blanketed the sky, mirroring the heavy mood within the Cole mansion. Vera stood in her private bedroom, quietly packing her few belongings into an old suitcase. The green sweater she'd worn while playing with Noah, the fairy tale book she read to him each night, and a drawing Noah had given her. Each item carried memories of the days she'd lived as part of this family. But the marriage contract with Jonathan Cole was over. His grandfather's will had been fulfilled, the inheritance officially secured, and Noah was safe with his father after a court victory. For Vera, it meant she had no reason to stay. She looked at the plain wedding band on her finger, touching it one last time before slipping it off and placing it on the bedside table. Her heart ached, as if tearing itself apart. This is the right thing, she told herself. I can't stay hoping for something that isn't real. But every step she took in this room, every corner of the house that reminded her of Noah and Jonathan, made her want to turn back, to believe the past months weren't just an act. That afternoon, Vera sat beside Noah in his room, forcing a bright smile despite her breaking heart. Noah was playing with a toy airplane, but his eyes fixed on her, sensing something was wrong. Miss Vera, why are you sad? He asked, his clear voice tinged with worry. Vera took a deep breath, holding his hand, trying to keep her voice steady. I have to go away for a while, Noah, but I'll visit you, okay? I promise to bring lots of storybooks. Noah shook his head fiercely, his eyes welling up. No, don't go. You're my mom. His words stabbed her heart. Vera knelt, hugging him tightly, tears falling silently onto his shoulder. I'll always love you, Noah, she whispered, her voice breaking. No matter where I am, I'll always be your Miss Vera. Noah sobbed, clinging to her, but Vera knew she couldn't stay. If she didn't leave now, she'd never find the strength. She gently pried Noah's hands away, kissed his forehead, and stood. He followed, grabbing her shirt, but Vera only gave a sad smile, stroking his hair one last time before leaving the room. In the living room, she left a letter on the dining table, where she, Jonathan, and Noah had once baked together, laughing like a real family. In trembling handwriting, she wrote, "Thank you for letting me feel like I belong to a family, even if it was pretend it was real to me. Take care of Noah. Vera." Vera didn't meet Jonathan to say goodbye. He was at the office and she didn't want to face him, didn't want to see his cold eyes or worse, a hint of warmth that might make her stay. She pulled her suitcase out of the mansion, glancing back one last time. The house was now just a beautiful memory, but she knew she didn't belong here. She returned to her old neighborhood where she'd grown up in an orphanage. The small apartment she rented smelled of fresh paint, but felt strangely empty. Vera began preparing for the charity class Jonathan had promised to fund, teaching children to draw and read. She threw herself into work, trying to fill the void in her heart with their laughter. But each night, as moonlight spilled through her window, she thought of Noah, his loving Miss Vera, and Jonathan, his gaze when he stood outside Noah's room, as if he wanted to say something but never did. She wondered if she'd truly done the right thing by leaving, or if she was just running from her heart. The Cole mansion grew colder than ever without Vera. Noah barely left his room, clutching the drawing he'd made for her, crying for Mommy Vera. Jonathan tried to comfort him, but each time he saw Noah's sad eyes, a sharp pain pierced his chest. He'd once thought he could control everything, his company, his life, even his heart. But now the emptiness in the house showed him how gravely he'd erred. One evening, after Noah fell asleep following a long bout of tears, Jonathan entered the living room and spotted Vera's letter on the table. He opened it, reading each line, his heart constricting. Even if it was pretend, it was real to me. The words stunned him, like a jolt waking him from a rational trance. He recalled Vera's old notebook, the one he'd found when she dropped it in the kitchen. He retrieved it from his drawer, opened it with trembling hands, and read her long ago words. Want a family even for one day. Want to be called mom, to be loved without fear. Each word cut like a knife, rousing him from the walls he'd built after his failed marriage to Sophia. He remembered Vera's smile as she played with Noah in the garden, how she stayed up all night caring for him when he was sick, how she stood strong against Victor and Sophia to protect his family. He realized he loved her, not for the contract, not for saving his company or Noah, but because she'd healed the wounds in him and his son. She was the light he never wanted to lose. Jonathan stood, clutching the letter, his eyes resolute. I can't let her go, he whispered to himself. He looked out the window, seeing rain begin to fall. A thought struck him. Vera's charity class was holding its opening today at the community center. He had no time to hesitate. Grabbing his coat, he ran to his car, determined to find her before it was too late. Rain poured over the city, turning streets into rushing streams. Jonathan drove through crowded intersections, his heart pounding as if it might leap from his chest. He carried no umbrella, no plan beyond a fierce resolve. Find Vera, tell her the truth. Arriving at the community center where her class was held, he parked and stepped out, letting the rain soak his suit and hair. Inside the small room, Vera stood among children, wearing a simple white blouse, her hair damp from shielding a child from the rain. She was helping them hang drawings on the wall, smiling gently, but her eyes held a sadness, as if hiding a void no one saw. Today's opening was the dream she'd nurtured for years, but without Noah, without Jonathan, it felt incomplete. Jonathan pushed open the door, rainwater dripping from his hair onto the floor. The sound made everyone turn. Vera looked up, stunned to see him standing there, drenched, his eyes locked on her as if no one else existed. The children whispered curiously, but Vera only heard her racing heartbeat. Jonathan, she whispered, her voice trembling. He strode straight to her, ignoring the onlookers. Vera, he said, his voice low but brimming with emotion, each word pouring from his heart. I don't need a contract anymore. I don't want to lose you. Be my wife, Vera. For real this time. Vera stood frozen, tears spilling, mingling with the rain on her cheeks. She shook her head, her voice breaking, hardly daring to believe. Why now? You don't need me anymore, Jonathan. You have Noah. You have everything. Jonathan took her hand, pulling her outside into the pouring rain. The cold water soaked her clothes, but she felt only the warmth of his grip. Because I was a fool, he said, his voice strong yet pained. I was scared to love again, scared of being hurt. But I can't live without you, Vera. You're my family, Noah's family. I love you. She looked at him, her heart racing, still fearing this was a dream that would vanish. If you mean it, why did you let me go? She asked, her voice breaking, tears blending with the rain. Jonathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, rain drenching them both. Because I was a fool, he repeated, his voice trembling with emotion. But from now on, I won't let you go anywhere. He leaned down, kissing her, a deep, fervent kiss, as if to erase every distance, every pain between them. Vera kissed him back, her hands clutching his shirt, her heart finally finding its home. The children inside clapped and giggled, but the two heard nothing but the rain in their own heartbeats. Under the downpour, they stood holding each other, as if the world contained only them. They returned to the mansion, soaked but hand in hand, their hearts lighter than ever before. As the door opened, Noah raced down the stairs shouting, "Mommy Vera!" He leapt into her arms, hugging her tightly, his eyes sparkling with happy tears. Vera knelt, embracing him, hearing him call her mom, for the first time without hesitation. She looked up at Jonathan, seeing him smile, a genuine smile, no longer cold or distant. In the living room, under the warm golden lamplight, Jonathan took the wedding band Vera had left behind and knelt before her. "This time it's not a contract," he said, his voice warm, his eyes shining with love. "Be my wife, Vera, forever." She nodded, tears falling, as he slipped the ring onto her finger. The band now held a new meaning, not a bond of obligation, but a promise of eternity. Noah clapped, bouncing around them, beaming. "We're a real family now." That night, with Noah fast asleep, Vera and Jonathan stood by the window, watching the rain subside, stars twinkling in the sky. He held her from behind, whispering in her ear, "I promise you a real family, one that will never leave you." Vera leaned into him, smiling, knowing this time it was forever. Their little family, though born from a contract, was now bound by the truest love. The gentle spring sunlight filtered through the tree branches, casting a warm golden glow over the Little Noah Charity School. The laughter of dozens of children echoed from the playground, where Vera Grace stood among them, wearing a light white dress, holding a sketch pad to guide them in coloring. A year had passed since she and Jonathan turned their fake marriage into a real one, and now she ran the school, the dream she'd nurtured since her orphanage days. Dozens of orphan children found joy and hope under her care, and Vera became an inspiration to the community, proving that kindness could change lives. Jonathan stepped out from the school's small office, where he served as honorary chairman. No longer the cold CEO of Cole Enterprises, he still managed the company but devoted more time to his family in this school, where he'd found life's true meaning. From a distance, he watched Vera smile radiantly among the children, his heart swelling with a warmth he'd never known before meeting her. That evening, in their cozy home, no longer the cold mansion of the past, Vera sat on the sofa, gently rubbing her growing belly. She was pregnant with their second child, and that happiness filled every corner of their family. Noah, now 5, knelt beside her, pressing his ear to her stomach, his eyes sparkling. "Little sister, you'll be so happy with Mommy Vera as your mom," he whispered, his voice clear and excited. Vera smiled tenderly, stroking Noah's hair, while Jonathan sat beside her, resting his hand on hers. They shared a loving glance. No words needed to know this was the family they'd both dreamed of, a real one. One weekend afternoon, the family gathered in the school's backyard. Jonathan held a shovel, Noah clutched a watering can, and Vera cradled a small sapling. Together, they planted it in the soil. Noah's tiny hands patting dirt over the roots while Jonathan supported Vera's shoulder, helping her stand steady. "This tree will grow with your little sister, Noah," Vera said, smiling. Noah nodded, cheering, "And with our whole family, too?" The three stood there, watching the sapling sway in the breeze, a symbol of their new beginnings and enduring love. Jonathan pulled Vera and Noah into a hug, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, creating a symphony of happiness. As dusk fell, Vera and Jonathan stood by the window, watching Noah play in the garden with a beaming smile. He held her from behind, whispering, "Thank you for giving me a family." Vera leaned into him, smiling, knowing their journey, from a cold contract to true love, was proof of the heart's power. Love sometimes starts with calculated steps, she thought, but with a sincere heart, it finds its truest rhythm, needing no contract to sign. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.